So we're going to get started with cutting, and when you're doing that, you're going to need to gather quite a few things in order to be able to get your Crawlbot up and running and working safely. So I'm going to walk you through some of the different things that you will need. You need to start off with a computer with the software installed. It is Mac only, so if you have a PC, you're out of luck, so you may need to find somebody who has a Mac that you can download the software on. And you also need your file downloaded from the Fusion 360. So you need some personal protection, including a dust mask, as well as some safety glasses and some earplugs. You can either use the ones that you kind of just put directly in your ears or the ones that you wear over your head. You're also going to need a brad nailer. We'll be using that a little bit later on. For that, you're going to need access to an air supply as well. Along with that air supply, a hose sprayer, also a hammer, a chisel, it's going to be for the very end, a tape measure, a set of tools. So these will come in a box that are with the Crawlbot. You'll need your mill. This is what you buy and I have a link to on Amazon. And of course access to the shop vac. That's going to be important for keeping everything nice and clean. Okay, so now that you've got all your tools, we're going to clear off the table, and we need to do a little bit of surface prep. This step is really important because you need to have a surface that is as level as possible, and so that means getting all the dust and debris off. And when you do that, that makes sure that you're going to have a nice, clean, and consistent cut. So you can see that we've got some kind of leftover bits on here from the last cut, whoever left that there. And so we're going to need to suck all that up and try to get this surface as flat as we possibly can. So to do that, we're going to take our shop vac and we're going to run it over the entire surface and suck up any loose bits of wood or sawdust or even small little nails or pieces that I left behind. Before we do that, we're also going to do a little bit of blowing to clear off the Crawlbot itself. After that, we're going to take our hammer and finish out any kind of protrusions from brad nails that were left behind. So we're going to go ahead and do some shop vac work. Now that that's done, you can see that we're able to pick up quite a bit. We're going to go ahead and start blowing the dust off of the Crawlbot. This is really important to be able to get all the sawdust that picks up out of all the gears and all of the machinery. You want to pay careful attention to anywhere where there's venting. So that's a spot where sawdust will really build up. And so we're going to use the blower attachment to get all of that out. And we want to obviously sweep it away from anything that's important, so we don't want to blow it toward our computer or anything like that. So we're going to start spraying it off here. You can notice how much dust it really does pick up. So we're going to work in all the little crevices, all the gears, up on top of the mill. There's actually quite a bit that builds up there, and so we want to make sure that it gets blown out really thoroughly. And this is important to do kind of between each cut that you do, to make sure that everything's going to run well, and that there's no sawdust jamming up the gears or the wheels or the CNC mill. Once that's done, you're going to grab your hammer, and we're going to take this and we're going to look for where there might be some brad nails sticking up from previous cuts. These are usually left behind when people remove their material from the bed. They should just be in these four corners. They shouldn't be anywhere else. And so if you take that hammer, you can just hammer down anything that's sticking up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be relatively flat and smooth. And so if you just get all four of those corners in pretty well, then you should be in pretty good shape for moving on to the next step. Okay, at this point we're going to work on actually attaching your board to the surface. Again, very important that we get this as flat as we possibly can. In this case, our Crawlbot is 48 inches across, and so the maximum width of material that you'll be able to put on this is 48 inches. The unfortunate bit is that most MDF is 49 inches across, and that means you're actually going to need to cut down your sheet just a little bit in order to make it fit. You can make it as long as you want, well, at least up to 8 feet. The pieces that you'll be working with for this project are going to be 4 feet by 4 feet. This piece that I'm using right now is about 36 inches. It's just a sample piece, and so I've got a little bit of extra room from side to side, but your piece is going to be going pretty much all the way across. Now when you put your piece on, you are going to want to make sure that you leave a little bit of room near the end. This is really important because you're going to be calibrating on this end. So in this case, I'm leaving about 4 or 5 inches from the end, and you should do that too, to make sure that when we go to calibrate the mill that we've got a little bit of wiggle room there. So do leave a little bit of space when you're setting it up. So now that we've got our piece on here, we're going to detach our air sprayer from before, and you can just pull back on this little collar and it should pop right off. There we go. And we're going to attach our brad nailer. It attaches to the same air hose, and you're going to pull back that collar, push it up, and then let go. Okay, and it should snap on. It may take you a time or two to practice. Okay, go ahead and put on your safety glasses, and we're going to put 4 brad nails into the wood at each corner. So just push into the corner and squeeze the trigger. Again, this is all part of being able to make it as flat as possible. And so a brad nail in each corner should do the trick.
Okay, now that you've got your piece of MDF anchored down to the base, the next thing that you're going to want to do is attach your router bit to the router. So to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to take this small lever here and flip it outward, and that's going to loosen the grip on the collar and pull the router straight up, and that's going to allow you to remove it from the Crawlbot. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take the 2 wrenches out of the Crawlbot kit. There's going to be a smaller one and a bigger one, and what these are going to allow you to do is to remove the nut that is holding this current bit in. So to do that, go ahead and take the smaller wrench, and it's going to fit around a slot that's on this silver base here. You take your bigger wrench and you're going to rotate these away from each other. It might be tight, so just put a little bit of effort into it. Once it's loose, you don't have to pull it off the way, you just have to loosen it, and you should be able to remove that bit. If this is the hackberry bit, go ahead and put it back into the Crawlbot kit. We want to save that one. That's one just for general cuts. Yours is going to be nice and new and sharp, and so go ahead and remove it. Insert it into the bit, and you can tighten this nut by hand for a little bit, but once it gets tight to your fingers, go ahead and put both wrenches back on, and this time you're going to rotate them together to tighten that bit up. Okay, so with that all tightened up, you're ready to go. You can slide it back in. When you do that, what you're going to do is you're going to notice these ridged edges here along the router, and those go along this little ridged spool right where you pulled off that lever. So make sure that those line up, and as they lower down in, you'll notice that this is going to spin. You can flip that shut, and you have your spindle ready to go and ready to cut. Okay, so now that you've swapped out your mill end and you've got a sharp bit in there, we're going to do calibration of the Crawlbot. And so to do that, you're going to need your laptop with the PrinterBot CNC software installed. One really important thing to note is you're going to be using your laptop for a really long time here, so I highly recommend that you plug it in and have it charging throughout the whole course of calibration and cutting. If your laptop dies in the middle of a cut, it's just lost, so make sure that you have it plugged in. So I have it hooked into the Crawlbot via the USB cable, so that's very important, so make sure that that is attached. And what we're going to do is we're going to power on the Crawlbot so that we can control it a little bit. To do that, there's two buttons here. There's a power button and the emergency switch. So these are both important. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to disengage the emergency switch. So you do that by turning it and it'll pop up. If you ever need to shut off the Crawlbot because it's just going crazy, you can just push that down and it's going to shut everything off. So you pop that on and then you can hit the power button, okay? And that's going to fire up the Crawlbot. You should notice that in your PrinterBot software that the interface changes. It goes from a connecting message to actually having the controls there. If it doesn't, then you may need to restart the software and it should connect. One of the things that I like to do is when calibrating, I change my units from millimeters to inches. This gives you a little bit more control and speed as you're setting it up. And then in the interface, you'll notice that there is an X, Y, and Z command with minus and plus. And this is what's going to allow you to move the Crawlbot back and forth and up and down. To kind of orient you. So we kind of looked at the orientation of the axes in Fusion 360, but as you come into the Crawlbot, there's a couple things to know. This orientation here, kind of going up and down, is your y-axis. Going toward negative y, towards 0, is this way. Going toward positive y, so numbers that are increasing, go further away. This is your x-axis, so x0 starts over here, and so if you hit x negative, it'll move it this way. X positive will move it this way. And then z is the up and down. Z down is down toward the surface of the Crawlbot table. Z up goes up. There are a couple things to remember. You do have to be very careful when positioning the Crawlbot. It does not have any sensors on it that keep it from going too far. And so it is possible to literally drive this thing off of the end of the table. And so when you are controlling the Crawlbot, you need to be very careful when you are pressing on the buttons. It is possible to make it go too far and go off the table or damage the machine, and that would be bad. So please be very attentive. If you lose control of it, if you think it's going to go out of control, remember that big stop button is right there, so never be too far away from that. So what we want to do is we want to home that router end to the corner of our material where we want to begin cutting. To do this, we're going to first home the Z-axis, and then we're going to home the X and the Y axis. And so to home the Z-axis, what we'd like to do is pick a corner very, very close to the beginning of our material cut. And we're going to be homing the spindle to the bottom of the board. Not the top like you might be thinking, but to the bottom. And so to do that, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the Y minus to bring the router this way. Okay, and I'm going to bring the X toward me. Right about to the corner. Okay, so we're going to stop here, reposition the camera, and we'll take a kind of close-up look to see how that Z-axis works. Okay, so now that we have the X and the Y kind of home to this corner, we need to adjust the Z-axis. Now you'll notice that this bit is kind of hanging off the edge of our material, and that's good because it needs to be able to come down and touch the bottom plate of the material. Now the way that we do that is you'll notice that we're going to unlatch this latch so that the router can freely move up and down. And we're going to lower our Z-axis until that touches the ground. And the way that we'll know that it's touching is because as it pushes on it just a bit, we'll notice this wheel moving just a hair. And so we're going to hit Z minus, and we're going to be looking for that small wheel to turn. Okay, so we saw that the wheel turned just a little bit. At that point, we can close this clasp, and we're going to hit the little bullseye. This is the 0 mark on the software next to the Z. So when we do that, you'll notice that it zeroes out the Z-axis, and we're going to raise that Z-axis back up using Z+, and we're going to raise it up to about anywhere between 0.75 and 1 inch, and that's going to give us a chance to clear and set the X and the Y axis. Now to do this, we're going to increase our Y just a little bit, and we're going to bring that in about an inch from each side. Now you do have to be careful. You need to make sure that wherever your bit is hovering above is not where you nailed it in. If that bit were to hit that nail, you're going to see lots of sparks and burning things and possibly mess up your cut. So do make sure that you come in a little bit on each side to make sure that you're not going to hit your brad nails. Once you found a good place to start, go ahead and hit the bullseye next to the X to zero out the X, and the bullseye next to the Y to zero out the Y. You are really close to being ready. Next thing that you're going to do is you're going to hit load. You're going to go find the file that you downloaded. So here you can see it's stool.nc. You'll notice that's going to load up your program, and you are just about ready to go. Okay, so once your file is loaded up, the next thing you want to do is find a good place for your laptop. So I like to put mine way, way, way behind to make sure that it's not going to get run into. This has plenty of clearance. You do need to make sure that the wires have plenty of slack, that they're not going to unplug themselves or get caught on anything. Once you have that, go ahead and put on your personal protection gear. So put on your safety glasses, your dust mask, and your hearing protection. This is going to be a loud, long, and dusty process. Okay, once those are on, you are ready to start. Next, first thing you're going to do is you're going to flip the router on using this switch. It's going to fire up. Then you're going to go hit run on your software. Now, if anything were to happen, you know, again, remember that you've got an emergency stop switch here. You also have the cutoff switch here. If something bad were to happen, hit that emergency stop switch, and then you can come in and turn off the router. So that's the order that things need to happen in. So we're going to fire this on, then we're going to go hit run. While this is happening, we are going to monitor the whole process. We're also going to be vacuuming up all the excess sawdust with the shop vac just to keep things clean, make sure that the bit is cutting without running into a lot of its own sawdust. So here we go. Okay, so you might have seen that I pulled this a little bit early. It looks like it was actually cutting too deep. Because we're cutting 1/8 of an inch each time, and this is a 1/2 inch, it should have taken 4 passes. But this came free in three passes in, so which tells me that it was cutting a little bit too deep. So you'll notice that when it kind of just kept cutting, I pulled this out so it wouldn't kind of go loose and screw anything up. So at this point I had a couple of options. These obviously aren't going to be able to be cut because they're loose and they kind of started wiggling around. We could have left this running and we could have gotten away with an outer body piece, which would have been fine. If this happens, it's important to go back and look at your file to see if there was any errors. Make sure all your heights and tolerances were set correctly. Could also be that we weren't precisely accurate when we were calibrating this. You'll notice that this board has quite a bit of give, so as it's pushing up, that's making it cut deeper each time, and so we're using kind of an old scrap piece of wood that's bowed. And so another thing that's important to keep note of is that the wood that you're using should be very, very flat. You don't want to store it so that it gets a good bow. So if you do that, you should be able to avoid this and get some pretty accurate cuts. Okay, so once it's done cutting, you can grab your hammer and chisel and go through each of the joints and just give it a good solid whack.
you can go and pull it off, and this is a piece you can take over to the sanders, and you can just take off those last little bits of the joints that were left. And that's it. Once you're done with the one piece, you'll move on to other sections of your work. Every time you do, you need to reset your Z to just the closest bit of exposed wood that you can. So that's very important. The scale of the Z may change as you move further down your piece of work, so do make sure to reset that Z each time. But you'll do this 12 times for each of your pieces, and you'll be able to put together your stool. And that's it.